About 5 years ago, my wife and I went on a weekend camping trip with two of our closest friends, another married couple. The campsite is just outside of Yosemite and is absolutely beautiful. The beauty of it, and creepiness of it, is that you have to take a dirt road for about an hour and a half off the main road to get to it. It's extremely secluded, but never felt threatening. It's a really popular campsite, so there are always people around, especially in the summer when this occurred. The first day was awesome. I don't remember exactly what we did, but I remember having a great time. The campsites are all fairly close together and usually separated by various shrubs, etc. I remember we were all pretty pumped about the site we got, as there were no neighbors on one side, just forest, and no one occupying the site closest to us. This is uncommon, as these campgrounds stay fully booked throughout the summer. Day 2 started normally. We had breakfast, and then headed to the lake for a couple of hours. The lake was about a 20-minute hike from the main campground. When we got back around 2-ish, we noticed that the site next to us now had a silver rental car parked on it. We didn't think much of it, and went about making a fire to cook with. At some point, we noticed the occupant of the site next to us, a pretty average-looking white dude, maybe early 40s. We all immediately caught on to the fact that he was constantly looking over at us. My friend Dave even made a comment to me under his breath. "You notice this guy keeps looking over here?" I remember feeling a little uncomfortable as we were all still in bathing suits from the lake, but made a conscious effort to ignore it. It's worth mentioning that we were a little bit buzzed and drunk. Not out of control or anything, just feeling pretty good. Throughout the afternoon and into the evening, we continued to notice the guy constantly looking over at us. In hindsight, Dave or I should have called him out. This story doesn't make us look great, but whatever. I had been stressed at work prior to this trip, and really didn't want to let some creepy dude throw off my relaxed vibe. Stupid, I know. The alcohol, coupled with the fact that we honestly kind of felt bad for him, led us not to confront him. Yes, it was very creepy, but I told myself he was just an awkward, lonely dude. Aside from the staring, there were a couple of mildly weird incidents that occurred leading up to the very weird stuff. The first was that at some point, he left his site to go do whatever. While he was gone, a girl, probably in her mid-20s, our age, walked by and snapped a picture of his license plate. I remember asking her if she needed anything, and she smiled awkwardly and kept walking. Dave and I both thought this was odd, but we were preoccupied with beer. Later into the evening, around 7-ish, the camp host was doing her rounds, checking people in. She checked us in and moved on to him. I remember us all eavesdropping intently to hear what they were saying. I think we just wanted to hear what this creep sounded like. He kept asking questions about the bathhouse. We didn't know there was a bathhouse, or even what a bathhouse was. But he had like 100 different questions about it. Where is it? How late is it open? Is it private? Maybe not that weird, but in context, definitely odd. The sun started to go down. We were all drunk, so we weren't too concerned with the creepy dude anymore. At one point, we went for a walk and noticed him snooping around what we believed to be the bathhouse. Now, I would call out this kind of behavior, but again, I was drunk and 5 years stupider at the time. We all laughed and talked about how creepy he was. Back at the site, we continued to drink and have a good time. At one point, the guy started eating beans aggressively out of a can in the light of his single lantern, no fire. He looked at us while doing it, and Dave and I kind of snickered to each other about how weird it was. I don't think the girls noticed. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. I think the guy had left his site at this point. I kind of remember us making jokes like, "I better not wake up to that dude looking in our window." My wife and I slept in our SUV with the seats folded down. Dave and Sarah slept in the camper shell of their truck. I remember feeling a little creeped out as I fell asleep, but shrugged it off. At around 2:30 a.m., both my wife and I were jolted awake by what we thought was a woman's scream. We both looked at each other and asked if the other had heard that. We came to the conclusion that it was probably people at some other site being loud and decided to go back to sleep. As I was trying to go back to sleep, I started feeling very unsettled. I decided to get out of my car and take a look around. I cracked my door, trying to be as quiet as possible. I'd gotten about one leg out of the car when I heard a faint but direct whispering coming from Dave and Sarah's camper shell about 4 feet away. I froze and then heard it again. I eventually realized that they were trying to tell me something. I whispered back, "What?" I then very clearly heard Dave say, "Start your car." I instantly realized that something was wrong, so rather than ask questions, I climbed back into my car to start it. Right away, Dave and Sarah burst out of the back of the camper and frantically jumped into my car. They told me to drive. They were too freaked out to explain anything, so I just drove kind of aimlessly. Eventually, I pulled over, figuring we were far enough away from whatever had freaked them out. Finally, Sarah calmed down enough to tell us what happened. As she put it, she was woken by a light coming from Creepy Dude's campsite. Apparently, he had set up lanterns and flashlights to spotlight himself, completely naked, masturbating in the direction of our cars. She also mentioned that he was flaccid and not able to finish. A gross detail, but I feel it's important. It gets weirder. At some point, he stopped and turned off the lights and began using a flashlight to signal across a small ravine that the campsite's backed up to. I'm talking like Morse code or something. Across the ravine, an old RV began to signal its headlights to signal back. Dave was awake by this point. I questioned them on this detail, and they both said it was very clear that they were communicating. After that, he turned off his light. Keep in mind, it is absolutely pitch black out here at night. After a few minutes, they heard footsteps around their car, followed by a hard tap on the window. This is what caused Sarah to scream, hence waking me up. At this point, I decided we need to call the police. The problem was there was absolutely zero cell service at the campsite. Furthermore, it was about an hour and a half up a service road from what was already a very remote part of the state, so leaving at night wasn't an option. We decided the best course of action was to alert the camp host. We drove around and eventually found the trailer that she lived in. She was understandably confused to be woken up at 3:30 in the morning, but was responsive. She mentioned that the guy was really weird when she checked him in and called the police on her satellite phone. Apparently, there was a massive wildfire burning that weekend, and the police said they wouldn't be able to send anyone out until sunrise. The camp host said there wasn't really anything she could do beyond calling the police. Basically, we were stuck in our car in the pitch blackness, while some crazy, masturbating dude was out and about, not to mention whoever was in that RV. One more really weird thing happened. At around 4 a.m., we're all sitting in my car when a man in a hood walked right up to the window. The second I noticed him, I turned on my engine and headlights. He ran off into the trees. We all sat in my car until sunrise. Once it was light out, we went back to the site to pack our things. His car was still there, with blankets hung on all of the windows. The whole thing just felt gross, and we wanted to get the hell out of there, so we quickly packed up and left. A couple hours after we left, I got a call from the police. They said they went out to the campsite and questioned the guy. He said he was simply showering. The cop told me there was nothing he could do. It was our word against his. He also questioned the people in the RV. They said they didn't know what he was talking about, but mentioned that, and I quote, "A very rude camper screamed in the middle of the night. The whole experience with the police was frustrating. I tried following up. I even tried getting help from a family member who's a sheriff. But even he said there wasn't anything they could do unless that particular police chief really wanted to investigate this guy. So that's the story. I learned a lesson about being polite when someone is making you uncomfortable. Nowadays, I'm much more aggressive with creepy people. I also know it's easy to hear this story and wonder why Dave or myself didn't just confront the guy, especially when he's literally masturbating at the car you're sleeping in. I don't know. I wish we would have shown more courage, but honestly, it was really scary in the moment. I'm okay with admitting that. Now I think it's kind of funny just how stupid we were and how bizarre the whole situation was. I also feel fortunate that no one was hurt. Clearly, we were dealing with a very fucked up individual who had accomplices. I can only imagine what their end goal was and what they would have been capable of doing. I also think they had done shit like this before. I just really wish the police could have done something. Back in 2016, my friends and I, for the longest time, had been itching to go camping at our local camping site in the Los Padres National Park in Southern California. When we found the perfect weekend to go that didn't interfere with any of our work schedules, we set the date. 3 days before the trip, we found out we were going to be hit by the El Niño rainstorm. Us, being the type of dudes that we are, didn't care if we got hit by the storm while camping. So we packed up our cars and made the 45-minute drive to the campsite. The campsite was a family-friendly one, where there were about 100 camping lots that circled around the clearing in the forest. We found the perfect spot that was underneath huge, thick trees that would help block out as much rain as possible, and it helped that the restrooms were only 30 yards away. As soon as we got to our spot, we took advantage of the afternoon sky being cleared for the moment, and we rushed to set up our spot. The layout that we did was that we pitched our tents close by, where our tent doors were only 6 feet apart. The reason why we did this is because in order to combat the rain, I brought a 30-foot by 30-foot thick blue canopy tarp that I threw over to cover us from the rain above and from the rain that would be running through the ground. It was a genius move on my part, but whenever you walk around our tent, you'd be making so much noise from the crunching of the plastic tarp. Hours passed, and we were all around the campfire. It was late into the evening, and this was the first time that I noticed there were barely any other campers. They were mainly camping in their RVs, like the fake campers they were. In my honest opinion, they're the smart ones, unlike my friends and I that were sleeping in 2 small tents, with our only protection being the blue tarp. I was getting tired from a long day of work, and I decided that I was going off to knock out. My friends followed my lead as well. The way that the sleeping arrangements were was that I had my friend Ray sleeping in my tent, and AJ and S were sleeping in theirs. Before I called it a night, I whispered to Ray and told him, "I'm going to prank S and AJ, but I'm not going to say anything." Ray smiled as I dialed my friends up. I called them on restricted, and S's phone started to ring. Both of them, being the way they are, got timid very easily as they said to one another, "Who's calling you this late at night?" "I don't know. They called me on restricted." "Are you going to answer?" "Of course not." Ray and I were holding in our laughter as they ignored our call. I decided to do it one more time. Once their phone started to ring, they started to freak out once again and said, "Who is it this time?" "Same person, I think. I'm going to answer." As they did answer, S said in a very shaky tone, Hello?" Ray and I had to hold in our laughter as we kept as quiet as possible. not wanting to make any noise that would give off that it was us. I held the phone close to my mouth as I began to breathe heavily in a murderous way. I ended the call, and just hearing them freak out the way they did was making my night even funner. Me being the idiot that I am, called them one more time, and this time, S picked up the phone immediately and said, in a tough voice, "Look, whoever this is better stop. I'm about to call the cops if you keep on calling. This is not a threat." Ray and I looked at one another as we, at the same time, began to fake moan so loud and immediately started to bawl out in laughter. AJ and S were so mad at us for pulling this prank on them, and they were cursing us out. Me, finally calming down from laughing so loudly, told the boys, "Good night. I'll have pancakes ready in the morning." Since I fell asleep relatively easily, I was out in a matter of minutes, while Ray, AJ, and S were up for a while longer. I was the first of my friends to wake up in the morning, and as I promised, I had the pancakes already cooking by the time that anyone else woke up. The smell of me cooking woke up my friends, and one by one, they got out of their tents. As we were eating, AJ spoke up and said, "Hey, Jay, the prank that you pulled last night went a little too far. Yeah, you had us ready to run to our car and take off." Me, feeling a bit guilty, apologized and said, "Sorry, guys, my bad." "Yeah, it's one thing to prank call us like that, but then to walk around our tent and then go inside in the middle of the night? It's totally off limits," S said. Me, not knowing what they were talking about, said, "What do you guys mean?" "Come on, still with the jokes? You were the one that was walking around our tent, and you walked in." Ray spoke up and said, "That wasn't Jay who was walking around. I thought that was you two getting your revenge on us for scaring you." "That wasn't us doing that. It was you two." So to explain, after I fell asleep, about an hour had passed where Ray, S, and AJ were still up and all was quiet in the forest until the sounds of footsteps were heard stepping on our blue tarp that was on the ground. At first, my friends thought it could have been an animal wandering around, but the heavy footsteps were a dead giveaway that it was a person. As they described, the person was walking around our tents, making constant figure eights. The person would place their fingers on the tent's fabric walls to run them up and down. The footsteps finally stopped after a couple of minutes, right in between our tent's doors. The three of them were already having their hearts pounding out of their chest. It was silent for a long minute until the sound of the tent's zipper being slid open. As AJ says, the tent's door was only opened about halfway, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. In the darkness, both S and AJ saw the silhouette of a man's face pop his head into the tent to look at both of them. AJ and S faked being asleep the entire time, but they kept their eyes locked onto the man. The man then opened the tent fully and walked inside, just standing at the entrance. The man didn't say a word, do anything, just watched both of them laying there in their sleeping bags. After their longest minute ever, the man just took his steps out of the tent, and his footsteps were heard walking away, disappearing into the night. The entire time that this was happening, S and AJ thought it was either me or Ray doing this, and Ray thought it was either AJ or S doing this. Back to us arguing back and forth at the breakfast table, we were interrupted by a man walking to our campsite, and he said, "Good morning, boys. How did the four of you sleep last night?" This man spoke in a smoker's voice, as if he'd been doing that for all of his 45 years of being alive. He wore a dirty, sweat-stained white t-shirt that looked more gray at this point, and his blue jeans looked as if they had never been taken off. He smelled like liquor not a good sign at 8 in the morning, and his words were just mumbling around. We didn't say a word to this guy, as he then asked if we had any cigarettes to spare him. I said that we didn't smoke, and he said, "Oh, well, if you boys want to visit me in my RV, just stop by any time." The man continued to walk away towards the restrooms, and as he was done using it, he walked back to our campsite. He didn't say anything this time, but he looked at us and gave us a nearly toothless smile and then walked back to his RV. I took note of his RV, as it was the only RV that stuck out as being dirty and more run down than the others. We quickly summed up the man as the person who was walking around our tents last night, and S and AJ now remembered that they smelled liquor from the person who was standing in their tent. We all agreed that we would keep an extra eye out on this guy, and if he did spend another night, we would most likely report him to the park rangers if he tried anything else. When it was around lunchtime now, the man came back, not to use the restroom, just to talk to us. "So, are any of you boys interested in buying an RV? You can all go check it out right now and see if you want to buy it. I don't need it anymore since my wife left me. Just check out the inside of the RV." "No, we're good, sir," I said, with a visible threatening tone. The man seemed to notice this, and he walked away. The man did end up leaving a few hours before sunset, but the entire time that he was there, he kept glancing at us. The man had his RV about 50 yards away from us, and I noticed that he had a restroom right next to his RV. Why did he make the effort in walking all the way over to our campsite to use our restroom? Also, why did he even use ours if RVs come with restrooms installed in them? Whatever the man wanted, we were just glad that we were about to enjoy the rest of our weekend. Hi, friends. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful night. Please take care of yourself, and sweet dreams.